As General Sherman said, war is hell, and anybody who's ever been close to one will agree with that. However, war, or the prospect of war, has motivated our scientific and technological people to some almost unbelievable achievements. Compare, for instance, our old World War II anti-aircraft guns with the new rocket-powered air defense missiles. As a young Marine in the Pacific Theater, I stood on the deck of the old battleship Arizona watching our anti-aircraft guns turn the sky black with air-burst explosives, but I didn't see many hits. As a matter of fact, I didn't see one yet. Nowadays, though, we have computer-launched, rocket-powered, heat-attracted missiles. Once launched, these missiles home in on their prey, reacting to the target's engine heat. Being self-propelled, they track the enemy with deadly precision, and regardless of its speed or evasive action, almost always score a hit. Now, I see a parallel, and I think you will too, between the old and the new weapons systems and the way in which many of us operate. Take a salesperson, for example. Some salespeople, like the old anti-aircraft projectiles, aim at their target as best they can and proceed along a predetermined sales track. But if their target, the prospect, fails to perform as predicted, they miss the sale, and if they miss by an inch, they might as well miss by a mile. In selling, one doesn't get paid for near misses. Other salespeople, like the new heat-attracted missiles, sense the prospect's reactions and adjust to them. Personal interaction with the prospect guides their presentation. They can double back, change pace, or make other creative modifications necessary to close the sale. Now, the difference between these two types of people lies in what's been called empathy-ego balance. And it's applicable not only to salespeople, but to men and women in all areas of activity where persuasion and communication and leadership are important. David Meyer and Herbert M. Greenberg discussed this in the Harvard Business Review. I see empathy as the ability to imaginatively project ourselves into another person's situation, to stand in his shoes. The man who possesses great empathy can sense the feelings and reactions of others and can change course as the situation changes. The empathic person, for example, picks up an infinite variety of cues and clues about his listener's feelings and convictions. He is, in effect, experiencing these along with his listener. The person with little empathy functions like the old weapons. Once he launches into a subject, he follows a given course of action with little regard or awareness of the feelings of his listener. Now then, ego means self, as in self-restraint, self-respect, self-esteem. To understand this, we have to disregard the popular but inaccurate conception that equates ego with big-headedness or conceit. The ego we're talking about here is the mental picture a man has of himself and his abilities. Ego provides the drive a person needs. It's his propulsion. His ego makes him want and need to succeed, not just for the money or merit to be gained, but for a deeper and more personal reason. His self-image improves dramatically with success and diminishes painfully with failure. Ego provides a strong competitive instinct to win every race every day, a will to win that triggers extra energy when extra effort is needed. Now, both empathy and ego are functions of the mind and powerful tools in any interpersonal situation. Best results are achieved with a strong balance of both empathy and ego. The key is balance. Let's go back to our sales example again and examine what happens when a salesperson's empathy-ego combination is not in balance. The one with lots of empathy but too little ego drive may be a fine person. He's a good guy and has many friends. You'd think he'd be a top producer, but he usually isn't. He gets along with the prospect, understands him, and frequently brings him near the close, but he lacks the ego drive to move the prospect that final inch to the sale. People like him, but too often end up buying from someone else. Now, just as inadequate is the salesperson with lots of ego drive but too little empathy. He'll bulldoze his way through to some sales, but failing to understand his prospects, he misses many more. He forgets that a sales situation is not a contest where one person wins and the other loses. Either both win together or both lose. So you see, the key is balance, that wonderful balance of a strong sales drive and a deeply empathic nature. Those who have cultivated this balance are invariably found at or near the top. So how's your empathy-ego balance with the people you come in contact with every day? If a need for greater empathy is indicated, this is an attribute that can be developed with practice. You might recall the advice Atticus Finch gave his young daughter Scout in Harper Lee's great novel To Kill a Mockingbird. He said, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." Remember, everyone needs friendship, prestige, independence, achievement, and group membership. And in addition to these universal needs, each individual has his own particular interests and desires. Keeping his needs in mind will help you see things from his point of view, get a feeling of what's taking place inside his skin. Trust that feeling, act on it, and you'll find your empathy increasing with use and practice. To become stronger in the ego department, you might consider that all the great leaders are individualists with a healthy degree of self-esteem. Reasonable egotism is part of character and strength. Don't demean it in yourself or others. Reflect on what others have accomplished, men having no greater opportunity or personal resources than you now command. Your ego drive will increase with an increase in your knowledge of the range of accomplishments you can achieve. An improvement in your self-image, a raising of your goals, will open the door in the wall you may have unknowingly built around yourself by past performance, past environment, past thinking. The man or woman with a strong empathy-ego balance is dynamic and self-reliant, has endless drive and energy, and is concerned about other people and himself. He's mentally balanced to solve the problem, achieve the objective, hit the target. Such a person is a guided missile who's more wonderful than any scientific development man can ever dream of. And this kind of person is a great person to be with, or to be. This is Earl Nightingale, and thank you.
But right off the bat, the odds are 95 to 5 that he's thinking, acting, and talking like the wrong group. They're wonderful people. They love him. They'd do anything in the world for him. They want him to succeed. But the odds are 95 to 5 they haven't got the answers he needs if he's to reach fulfillment as a human being, if he's to reach this success that he wants, if he's to reach into these deep reservoirs of ability and genius we know he possesses and draw it out. Well, he starts in school. The most important thing to a little boy in school is to be liked by the other little boys in school. And so at this tender age, he begins to follow other little boys his same age who don't know any more than he knows and who do not necessarily have any capacity for leadership. And he does this in the first grade, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth, and year after year after year, he forms himself into a composite average of other little boys his age, trying to be like them, trying to do the only thing in the world that's impossible for a human being to do, which is to be like somebody else. Now, let's say he goes all the way through school, usually goes in the military service. Again, he's caught in a vice-like grip of conformity. Now, let's say he's 25 years old, out of school, out of service. What's he going to do? As a rule, he'll go back to his hometown, unless he's married, in which case he'll go to his wife's hometown. But let's say he goes back to his own hometown. He's single. He doesn't know quite what to do. He's standing on a corner one morning, and a friend that he knew in school comes up and says, "Hi there, Charlie, what are you doing?" He says, "Nothing." He said, "Why don't you come down and work where I work? It's a pretty good place. The pay's regular. We got all kinds of fringe benefits and so on." And so he does. The odds are about, again, 95 to 5 that his first job is taken as a result of random application. On the job, without thinking about it, the most natural thing in the world for him to do is to look around, see how the other guys are doing their job, and to begin doing his the same way, assuming that what is normal for them is normal for him. No reason for this. He doesn't think about it. He just does it. Now, he has stretching in front of him 50 years or more in the golden age that man has been dreaming of since the days of ancient Greece. What's he going to do with these 50 golden years? Well, let's take a close look at him. We know that he works 40 hours a week, as a rule. 40 hours a week, which leaves him 72 hours a week when he's neither working nor sleeping. 72 free, discretionary hours each week to do with as he pleases. Now, at this point, of course, he's married. He has his little house and his little car. And this is about what he does with his free 72 hours every week. He'll do what the other fellows are doing with their free 72 hours every week, which is virtually nothing at all. On a typical day, he'll quit right on the dot, get in his little car, go to his little house, go in his little kitchen, kiss his little wife, and say, "I'm tired." They've even figured out why he says that. The experts believe that he used to hear his father say that back when men used to get tired working during the day, and he picked it up and he repeats this every night when he gets home. He bolts his little meal and then heads for the living room where he turns on his escape box. Click. Takes 15 or 20 seconds for the screen to light up, a period of time he finds interminable, but he gets through it somehow. Maybe kicks the dog or thumbs through a magazine or something. But then the screen lights up and he does too a little bit, and there in front of him he sees people in all kinds of funny old-time costumes all killing each other at a great rate. One expert has agreed that the average family can see more death and bloodshed and carnage on his television set in a week than Crassus saw when he crucified 6,000 prisoners on the southern road to Rome. But you know how those experts are. He could certainly be off one or two. But he sits there for about 5.5 or 6 hours. 25% of all free time now is spent in front of the tube, according to the latest statistics. Now, there's nothing wrong with this particularly, except that he's watching other people who are earning excellent incomes in the pursuit of their careers, while he doesn't make a nickel and gets the only two things you can get from watching TV on that kind of a schedule. He gets red eyes and a hollow head. Now, this is not meant to be an indictment of television. I've got a couple of television sets at home, too. I have a couple of cars at home, too, but I don't go home at night and drive around the block for 6 hours. If there's someplace I want to go, fine. My car will take me there. If there's a great program, like a golf match or something like that, I want to see it. But he sits there for 6.5 hours until finally his wife, who's a little more practical than he is, taps him on the shoulder and she said, "Charlie, I think it's about time you went to bed. You've got to get up in the morning, go to work." And he's okay, and he shuts it off. He knows how to do that. He just shuts it off and goes to bed. Next morning he gets up and he does this all over again. He does this every day for 40 years. At the end of 40 years, he's retired, which always kind of catches him by surprise. No one's ever figured that one out either. And then he dies at 85 or 90, the way medical science is moving us along, out of sheer boredom. Well, what's the problem? Is there a tragedy here? Not really, if that's the way Charlie wants to spend his life, our mythical, hypothetical young man. If he wants to spend his life that way, that's his business. He lives in a free society, he can do anything with it he wants. But there's a terrible tragedy here if he's living that way because of the total lack of a decision. If he's living that way simply because he's still doing what he was doing in the first and second grade, and that's going along with the fellows up and down the block on the unspoken assumption that they know how to live, then there's a real tragedy there, because they've never known how to live, not in all the recorded history of mankind. He never finds out who he is. He never reaches into the deep depths of his abilities, his talents. He never learns that he can have just about anything he wants in the world, that he can call his own shots, tell his own fortune. And it's kind of a pity. Well, what's needed? Well, what's needed, I think, is a checklist, like an airplane pilot uses. I think that living successfully is as important as flying an airplane. And here's some of the things that I think should be on that checklist that could help this man live a more meaningful, more interesting, more exciting, more enjoyable life. The first thing that he ought to have on his checklist, in my opinion, is the word a goal. A man without a goal is like a ship without a rudder. He doesn't know where he's going. He then belongs to that 95% that is just living day by day, month after month, like a starfish or an amoeba. He needs to know where he's going. Back in the early days of navigation, sailors used to see a strange sight in the Antarctic. They'd see a giant iceberg towering high out of the sea, and it would be moving against the wind. The wind would be blowing this way. The great iceberg would be moving right into the teeth of the wind. And this, of course, frightened the sailors whose ships were powered by the wind, until it was discovered that, of course, only a fraction of the great berg was visible, and that its huge, ponderous roots were caught in the great currents of the ocean. And it was being borne purposely along its way, regardless of the winds and the tides on the surface. Well, this is what a man needs. He needs his roots deep in a great main stream of his own choosing, and then he'll move along his way, regardless of the winds on the surface of his life or short-term expediency, and he'll get to where he's going. The second word on our checklist might be the word attitude. It's been called the most important word in any language in the world, because it's our attitude toward our world, toward all the people in it, that will determine the world's attitude and all the people's attitude toward us. It's a simple thing. Most of us know it, but we tend to forget it. People will react to us according to our attitude. And our attitude is the greatest gift we can be given. You know, the little creatures of the world were given a wonderful gift by Mother Nature called protective coloring, in which they can blend into their background without being seen. But man was not given this great gift, because man was given an incalculably greater one. Only man has the godlike power to make his surroundings change to fit him, because his environment will change as he changes. A man's environment is a merciless mirror of him as a human being. And if he thinks his environment can stand a little improvement, all he has to do is improve, and his environment will improve to reflect the changing man. Third would be the word think. To think. The highest function of which a human being is capable. It was put pretty well by the great Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Archibald MacLeish in his great play, The Secret of Freedom, in which he has one of his characters say, The only thing about a man that is a man is his mind. Everything else you can find in a pig or a horse.
The old fable about the devil's sale. It's interesting, and like most old fables, it has a moral that's worth thinking about. The story goes that Satan was having a sale of his wares. There on display and offered for sale were the rapier of jealousy, the dagger of fear, and the strangling noose of hatred, each with its own high price. But standing alone on a purple pedestal, gleaming dully in the light, was a worn and battered wedge. This was the devil's most prized possession, for with it alone he could stay in business, and this was not for sale. It was the wedge of discouragement. Why do you suppose the devil, valued so highly, actually would not sell the worn and battered wedge of discouragement? Makes you stop and think, doesn't it? I think he prized discouragement because of its enfeebling, demoralizing effect. Hatred, fear, or jealousy may lead an immature person to act unwisely, to fight or run or grab, but at least he acts. Discouragement, on the other hand, hurts him more than any of these. It causes him to sit down, pity himself, and do nothing. Now, this doesn't have to happen, but unfortunately it all too frequently does. Not until we realize that discouragement is often a form of self-pity do we begin to take stock of ourselves and our predicament and decide to act, to do something that will take us out of an unpleasant situation. The answer to discouragement, to self-pity then, is intelligent action. Let me give you an example. Our good friend W. Clement Stone, one of this country's wealthiest and most successful business leaders, formed the habit in the early days of his career of saying, "That's good," whenever anything happened, good or bad. Most of the time, of course, it was something good, but even when he learned of a near calamity, a deadly serious situation that would have sent a lesser man scurrying for cover, he'd smile and say, "That's good." Then, as his associates shook their heads in resigned disbelief, he'd tear headlong into the problem and find what was good in it. And invariably, some element in the situation could be turned to advantage. Now, there are times when misfortunes come down on all of us in bunches like bananas. Yet if we understand that something good can usually be found in almost any situation, we'll go quietly and efficiently to work on the most important part of the problem, the one that can be turned to advantage. When that's taken care of, we can go on to the next part. That's the best thing we can do, and it's the mature way to get rid of discouragement before it gets rid of us. Everyone has days or even successions of days when nothing seems to go right. A large account is suddenly lost. Anticipated plans fall through. It seems as though the sun has gone out. This is the time to take the long-range, intelligent view. Since self-pity or inactivity cannot possibly help the situation, the only rational course to follow is to go after another large account, to make more presentation, to replace those lost sales, to be confident in the knowledge that over the long haul things will average out to our advantage. But even more important, losing an account, being disappointed, or failing to convince others on some point important to us often gives us just the pause we need to ask ourselves, why? Maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe something we're doing, while it isn't exactly wrong, could be done better. Here's an opportunity to improve ourselves and possibly increase our effectiveness in dealing with others. Some of the most successful people I know have, at one time or another, been forced by a stretch of poor productivity to analyze their methods and use of time. Now, a dry spell is no fun for anyone, but it's often the only situation extreme enough to get us to look at ourselves, find out what we're doing, why we're doing it, and whether this is the best possible way it can be done. As Emerson said, when a man is pushed, tormented, defeated, he has a chance to learn something. Here's something else to think about. Discouragement very often comes on the heels of crisis, and it's been said that crises are thoroughfares. We can go either way, up or down. We go up out of a crisis by doing something constructive. We go down by wallowing around in our problems and feeling sorry for ourselves. I believe you'll agree that discouragement, which comes to all of us sooner or later, is a test of nature. Those who refuse to yield to it in time pass through discouragement to the smooth and sunlit seas beyond, and what once seemed to be a storm of such ferocity that it blotted out the whole world is soon forgotten. And we recognize that, though we couldn't see it at the time, whatever it was that seemed so bad was actually for the best in the long run. Whenever you face discouragement, try to keep in mind three vitally important points. First, discouragement is often a form of self-pity, an expensive emotion we can get along very well without. And the most effective antidote for self-pity is intelligent action. Next, Within any discouraging situation, there's almost always lurking an opportunity for growth, maturity, and future success. There's something good about it. And finally, discouragement should be kept in its proper perspective. What may at the moment seem like the end of the world won't seem so important in 10 days and won't be very important in 10 months. Take the long-range view, and you can't be defeated by momentary setbacks. The Chinese have a saying that if you live with a disaster for 3 years, it will turn into a blessing. The devil couldn't get along without his priceless wedge, but we can, by realizing that being human qualifies us for some occasional pressure by that wedge, but that we have within us the strength to pull away and use it to our advantage. We'll wind up being a great deal happier and far more successful. The next time you're tempted to feel discouraged about something, try taking the attitude of that business executive we talked about. Simply say, "That's good," and then start finding out what is good about it. This is Earl Nightingale, and thank you. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale. The exciting, the phenomenal era in which we live has been called the Golden Age. It's an apt description. During our lives, more changes have occurred, more progress has been made than during any previous millennium in the development of man. It would be almost impossible to select the most important discovery in recent years. What would you choose? The jet engine, atomic energy, the new metals, synthetic fibers, rockets, satellites, transistors, the laser, television, plastics, antibiotics, computers, men on the moon, self-image psychology, mass communications? Well, the list goes on endlessly. And if reflection on the recent past is amazing, what about the near future? No one can say for sure what changes will come during the next 5 or 10 years, but they will come, and they'll be amazing, even fantastic. The head of one of the largest corporations, serving a term as professor at Columbia University, recently said that the 2 most important areas of development in the future will be the collection of data for business and marketing and the study of the motivation of people. And that's what this program is all about. Studies conducted by major universities and business organizations indicate that less than 10% of job failures are due to inability to master the technical aspects of the job. Now, this means that more than 90% of such failures are due to lack of understanding of life, of people, and oneself, and to lack of motivation to acquire and to apply this understanding, to narrow the gap that exists between habitual performance and potential performance. Researchers tell us that the next 10 years are going to offer business and the individual the greatest rewards in history. We can count on seeing the bulk of spending in this country being for things, products, and services over and above the necessities, which are food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and medical care. This will be the first time this has happened in the entire history of the human race. Now, what does all this rapid change mean to you and me? Doesn't it mean that our futures are virtually unlimited if we'll see ourselves in relation to the present and the future? Of course it does. Change has become our way of life. We can either keep up, move ahead, or fall behind. We can't stand still even if we wanted to. Now, while automation and new methods are making many jobs obsolete, the world will always demand effective leaders, men and women who can contact, inform, persuade, and deal effectively with people. The man or woman who can do this will never become obsolete. Unfortunately, though, many people in all fields have a tendency to forget that the future belongs to those who prepare for it, that we can't win in the space age with obsolete ideas. The president of one of our corporate clients recently mentioned that while we're all aware of the tragic school dropouts, we often forget that grown-ups drop out too. It's unfortunate but true that for many there comes a time when, for one reason or another, or perhaps for no reason at all, they drop out. They stop learning. They stop growing. And it's at this precise point that they compromise with the world as to what they will become as human beings during their chance at life. This is their apogee, the highest point of their lives. From here on, obsolescence sets in as they quit acquiring new knowledge. Now, we expect our companies to grow, our country to continue to lead the world and prosper, but all too often we make the unspoken assumption that we know enough, that we're good enough to meet the challenges and changes of the future without changing ourselves. Before we can claim knowledge for our own, we must meet 2 requirements. I believe Will Rogers described them best. He said, "You don't know anything you haven't learned, and you don't know anything you don't remember." So having knowledge requires first learning, and second, remembering. These recorded messages are intended to aid you in both areas. Each is a distillation of many great minds on the subjects of living successfully and communicating more effectively with others. Now, since they're both short and recorded, you can listen to them repeatedly and effortlessly in just a few minutes a day. Now, a company can back a man up with the finest product, the best reputation, outstanding advertising, and all these things help. But they're all behind him when he sets about doing his job, his own work. At this point, it's up to him. He's as alone as a driver on the track at the Indianapolis 500. Every man or woman performing his or her special skill is on his own when it's time for him to produce, to deliver the goods. And that's why we all need to learn new ideas and be constantly reminded of old ones if we're going to compete successfully with those who do. But why must we be reminded, or find a way to remind ourselves of these great ideas? It's because our memories are short. In one respect, this is good, in that we quickly forget our past mistakes, failures, and embarrassments. But it's bad in that we also tend to forget those things we need to remember daily if we're to achieve the results we want. These short messages are intended to give you instant knowledge, and then in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead to provide quick and effortless instant reminders. Unlike books, which we'd like to read again and again but seldom do, you'll find these recorded ideas easy to listen to at any time of day or night. Just a few minutes of listening, and you're back on the track again with a wealth of helpful ideas you can put into action immediately. Now, no one can force an individual to improve, become bigger and more effective in whatever he does. The person who moves forward has to do it through individual effort, and this is as it should be. Because in the last analysis, every person is working for himself. He's building his own life, regardless of where he happens to find his rewards. And the ideas and principles in these messages provide you with an opportunity to grow, to live and work closer to your potential as a human being. What action you as an individual take is your own affair. There isn't a human being on earth who's interested in growth and personal success who doesn't have these 4 vital needs. 1, information. 2, a plan of action to put that information to work. 3, reminding, constant reminding of what he or she knows. And 4, inspiration, the motivation to grow and build a better life on the foundation of his present one. I hope you'll enjoy these messages, and more, find them helping you toward the goals you want to achieve. Thank you.